Hi, I'm Mary Raymer. I'm one of the external affairs managers at the National Housing Federation, and I'm joined by Craig Thornton, who's Risk and Assurance Director at Sovereign Network Group, who will be chairing this year's Audit and Risk Conference, which is taking place in Manchester later this year on the 12th and 13th of November. We're just going to have a short conversation about your thoughts in the lead up to this year's conference. So welcome, Craig. Thanks for joining us and thanks for chairing this year's event. Firstly, what most excites you about the NHF's Audit and Risk Conference this year, and what are you most looking forward to?
What excites me most about it, I think, is it's great. It's always great to bring together colleagues from across this sector, and to get all of that brain power in one place. And there's a lot of richness that comes from the conversations. I think people get a lot of value from the sessions that we run in the conference. But I think a lot of value just comes from interconnecting with other people, thinking about the things that are relevant to us from a risk controls, assurance purpose, our internal audit colleagues. Bringing together all of those thoughts and ideas in one place is really powerful.
Brilliant. Just thinking about the wider external operating environment that we find ourselves in at the moment and how the global risk landscape seems to be getting more volatile each year. What factors should housing associations be considering in this environment?
So I think the world has been characterized by increasing volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity for a long time, right? But this is essentially why our functions exist. That's why we have the capability to think about the things that might be relevant to us. What are the things that can stop us achieving what we're trying to achieve? What are the things that might derail us, distract us, slow us down from all of the important objectives, the things that we as organizations are trying to deliver? I think what is more difficult now is there's probably two things actually. One is the amount of noise, the number of things that you have to think about in any given day, any given minute has increased, and I think the speed that things move at has increased as well. And I think I think it's really important that we get good at filtering out the noise and taking that step back and saying, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on, but what's really relevant to us? And I think we've got to use the kind of tools at our disposal, any way that we can help to process the volume of information, the speed that things move, use the tools that are at our disposal now to do that, to help us to do that. And I think the conference is a great opportunity to do that, kind of take a step back, take a moment. And we've tried to do that with the agenda to make sure that we start with the big picture and the context that we're all operating in, but then zoom into the things that are really relevant to us. And I think you've got to separate what's really relevant, what might impact us, from what's just noise. And there's not much we can do about some of those things. We've got to find the things that are relevant in all of that noise for us and make sure that we're dealing with those.
Definitely. Just bringing it back to the conference itself, we find that the Audit and Risk Conference is a popular conference for board members. How do you see the role of the Audit and Risk Committees changing?
I'm not sure if the role is changing. The expectations are perhaps rising, but I think that's been true for a long time. I think board members and committee members have been on I've really been on a journey where the expectations of the level of governance that organizations will have, the kind of awareness of the environment that they're operating in, the clarity they'll have on what the risks are to the organization and ensuring that those risks are understood and mitigated. I think those expectations have risen, and I think they continue to rise. I think it's a really demanding job to be a board or a committee member, and particularly we're talking about audit and risk committees, obviously, when we're thinking about this conference. I think it's really demanding, and I think it can make you nervous as a board member as well as an audit and risk committee member. How do I keep up with how do I keep up with all of that? How do I keep up with the level of expectations, the demands on us as a committee? How do I again separate that noise? What's background noise? Where should our focus be? make sure that we're kind of understanding the big picture, but also kind of spending our time where it's most relevant. And hopefully the conference will help to do that.
So what would you say to someone who's attending this year's conference for the first time this year? And what would you say is maybe the one thing not to miss?
I'd say, let me give some thought to that, kind of the second part of that question. So if somebody's attending the conference for the first time this year, I'd say welcome. Right, it's great to have you here. I think it's a great time to be involved in these disciplines, and I think people are understanding better the role that being good at managing risk, how critical that is for the organization, to be able to put it in the context of it's a really critical part of being a resilient organization. And that's what we're looking for, is resilient organizations. It's what we need to be in the landscape that we operate in. It's what the regulator expects, not just a kind of narrow view of financial resilience, but a broader view of how resilient are we as organizations. Our ability to identify risks, identify the things that might go wrong to stop us achieving what we're trying to achieve, is really critical to make sure that you've got the controls in place. How do we mitigate those risks, right? That's about having the controls in place. And then how do we have assurance that those controls are doing what they're meant to do? How do we know that we're actually mitigating those risks that we think they are? So that is, I think, much better understood now than it ever was. And I think coming into, being part of this conference, being part of these disciplines, increasingly important part of the organizations, understood to be an increasingly important part of how you make your organizations resilient. So I think welcome, come and take all of that kind of knowledge away, that thinking, that cross-pollination with your peers, and then take that back into your own organizations.
Brilliant. Yeah. And just finally, one last question. Can you describe audit and risk in one single sentence?
Audit and risk. Okay, so give me a sec.
Yeah.
Okay, audit and risk are fundamentally important concepts, but they're not standalone concepts. And I'm going to fail to describe them in one sentence, I think. But we've got to think of them in a joined up way, so that the conference itself is an opportunity to to bring people together to share ideas. The disciplines, audit and risk as disciplines, are fundamentally core components of how you guarantee your organization is a resilient one and can operate and thrive in this complex and volatile, ambiguous and uncertain environment that we're all operating in.
Yeah, perhaps a long sentence, but very nicely put, definitely. Yeah, well, that's it. Thank you so much for your time today, Craig, and I look forward to seeing you in Manchester in November.
Thoroughly looking forward to it. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.